can we become addicted to states like fear, anger, guilt, sadness, just the same way that we get addicted to gambling or cigarettes or alcohol? It's Ryan from the Melbourne Centre of Healing here. We all know that person, right? We've all got those friends, or maybe even it's ourselves a lot of the time, who have certain traits, certain emotions that are sort of part of their personality. You know, we might know Bill. Bill's a great guy, but he's a bit on edge, he's a bit angry all the time. Or Judy, I know Judy, she's awesome, but she's always feeling guilty about stuff. Or Mark, oh yeah, Mark's a great guy, but he's so anxious, he's really, really fearful about everything. You know, we have all these people in our lives, and maybe us, who have these emotions attached. So how do those emotions become part of our so-called personality? Well, an event happens. An event happens when we're younger, generally in childhood, maybe as old as adolescence. And we have an event with one of these negative emotions attached. So let's use guilt as an example. So let's say I have an event when I'm younger and there's a lot of guilt around it. I feel super, super guilty about something. It may not even be my fault, but that's the way that I feel in that event, okay? And I go through that event, there was no compassionate adult present for me, and I didn't know how to properly process that emotion. Then time goes on. Maybe later that day, maybe the next day, I think about that event. And when I think about that event, it's now a memory. It's gone from experience to a memory. And because our negative emotion hasn't been processed, it's still attached to that memory. So anytime that I think about that event, I reflexively have the response of guilt. I automatically trigger guilt as soon as I think about that memory. So I can't get past this memory, and I keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it for the next couple of days. So now this event, which had guilt attached, now I keep triggering guilt for the next few days, pretty much constantly. So now guilt is my mood. I'm in a guilty mood for these few days. Because I still don't process and make peace with what happened, it keeps going on and keeps going on. My body now starts to memorize the emotion of guilt. And this mood that I'm in now goes on for weeks, and it becomes my temperament. I now have this temperament that seems to be sitting over me like a dark cloud, which is the emotion of guilt. Then what happens? I keep going. I keep not making peace with it and keep triggering back to it. And now this becomes part of my personality. And this goes on for months and years. And what happens in this process, because I keep stewing in this guilt and not being able to process it, my body, being the amazing, smart, adaptive thing it is, it thinks that whatever happened, this one experience of guilt, it now thinks it's happening constantly because we keep triggering it with our thoughts. Now, because of that, our body starts to change. The cellular expression of us starts to change. Because any emotion, what it is on a cellular level, our cells are making a chemical expression that equals whatever the emotion is. So it's a different kind of chemical expression for guilt or anger or fear or shame. Or it can be a combination of those things, which is its own chemical signature as well. You know, I know for me, I had a lot of in my past fear, guilt and sadness. So you combine those three, that's a chemical expression on a cellular level of that feeling. So what happens, our body, because it's so amazing and adaptive and thinks that this guilty situation keeps happening over and over again, our cell structure starts to change. The receptor sites around our cells start to shift, and we make guilty the new normal, okay? Guilty is now the new normal. So we feel a little bit more normal. We sort of get used to the guilty feeling, but we're always getting around in our life with that guilt lingering in the background. And because now our body thinks that's the norm, whenever we step outside of the norm, we keep getting pulled back into guilt. This is why we attract certain situations into our life. So for the guilty person, they will go through life and attract situations that make them feel guilty in order to feel normal again, because they now, guilty is the new normal. So in essence, they are addicted to that emotion. I've had it as well with, say, someone who's memorized the emotion of anger. And I had this experience not too long ago. You know, I can go months at a time in my car driving without getting pissed off at someone else on the road. I was in the car with someone who had memorized that state of anger, and I couldn't believe it. It was like there was a beacon on top of the car saying, cut me off, beep at me, heckle me, and this person's getting cut off left, right, and center, and I couldn't believe it because they're attracting situations into their life to make them feel normal, which for them is anger. So now this becomes part of our personality, and our personality creates our personal reality, okay? Now, let's say that I'm the guilty person and I've got this guilt as part of my being now, as part of my personality, and maybe I want to go about changing that. So let's say that I'm out somewhere with a mate and something happens like at a restaurant and I start apologizing to the cashier. Then we leave and my mate's like, dude, why do you have to apologize to everyone? That wasn't your fault. You don't have to feel guilty about every single thing that happens. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Why do I always do that? My friends now told me about an unconscious pattern that I have. Now it's conscious. And I'm starting to connect dots throughout my whole life and go, why do I have to always feel guilty? He's exactly right. So I make a firm decision right then that I'm not going to feel guilty anymore. I'm sick of feeling guilty all the time and I've had enough. So for the next few hours, I want to feel more empowered. My shoulders come back, my chest comes out. I'm like not going to apologize for anything and I'm going to speak up and be myself. And it feels good at first. I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling more empowered now. This is awesome. What then happens after probably a few hours, if not half a day, we start to get irritated. Okay, something doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel normal. Because now, on a cellular level, we've trained our cells for years and years to now express this chemical expression of guilt and for that to be the norm. Now our cells are looking up at us, our body's looking up at us going, dude, what are you doing? You trained us to be this way for years, now you're going to not be this way? And because our body always wants to bring us back to homeostasis, back to the normal, it'll want to drag us back. And it drags us back by making us feel irritable, making us feel moody, making us feel uneasy. And then also we'll start to have thoughts because our cells will then, our body will start to send messages up our spinal cord into our brain and we'll start to have some sabotaging thoughts. We might hear things like, why are you doing this? Well, let's do this next week. Don't do it now. Who do you think you are to not feel guilty? Let me just show you some things from your past to reinforce the fact that you should feel guilty. This is exactly the same. Imagine if someone's trying to quit cigarettes, right? And you quit cigarettes and then for the first day or two, you're like, yeah, I feel fantastic. Then all of a sudden you feel irritated and the thoughts come up going, just have one. You're stressed this week, just have one cigarette. You know, it's exactly the same because what happens, our body, our cells are withdrawing from the chemical expression of whatever emotion we have memorized over years of our life. So I do believe that we can get addicted to our emotions in this sense, if you broaden your perspective of what an addiction might be. So that's the bad news. What's the good news? Well, the good news is twofold. The good news is number one, because we have memorized and learned a negative emotion, we can unlearn that emotion, which is great news. We can unlearn that emotion by going back to the originating event when we first felt guilty, be able to shift the emotion on a physical level and start to see that event in a very, very different way. We need to go back and see events a different way because all we do normally is a memory will look at things the same way every time. You need to process an emotion through the body so your body and mind can go in the same direction. This is why positive thinking doesn't work. It's a massive trap because if you feel guilty in your body and then your mind says, I want to change and I want to not feel guilty, your mind's going one way, your body's going the other. And you're in opposition, you're pulling both ways. When you're pulling both ways, you stay stuck, you don't move forward. You need to go back and get your body and mind going in the same direction. That way you can move forward and you can unlearn that negative state that's plagued you for so long. The other bit of good news is, because you've become an expert at learning states like guilt, shame, anger, fear, sadness, hurt, we can memorize other emotions as well. We can memorize peace. We can memorize love. We can memorize gratitude. We can memorize acceptance and all the other positive states that are amazing in this world. So that is the good news. So can we get addicted to our emotions? On some level, I'm going to say yes. But like any other addiction in the world, we can become unaddicted too. That's all from me today. Have a beautiful day, people. Have a beautiful week. I'll speak to you all next time. Peace out.